In a previous video, we explored the loss of the Japanese heavy cruiser Chikuma, which quite literally went missing in action, and today we're going to take a look at another cruiser the Japanese lost track of during the Battle off Samar in the form of Chōkai. Now, as far as the Japanese side goes, Chōkai's loss is a little bit more documented than Chikuma's because radio contact was kept with Chōkai in some form. However, the actual loss of Chōkai is a bit more mysterious than Chikuma's. The reason for this is the fact that Chōkai's wreck has been discovered since it sank, and what has been believed for decades ended up being proven false. At 7:05 a.m. on the 25th of October 1944, Cruiser Division 5's Chōkai and Haguro opened fire on Taffy 3. Up to 8:30 a.m., Chōkai has very little activity outside of reporting air attacks taking place on it and striking enemy warships with its gunfire. According to Haguro's action report, at 8:49, it and Chōkai altered course, closing the distance with Taffy 3, along with Cruiser Division 7's Tone and Chikuma. The four cruisers were closing in on carriers that were 40 degrees off the starboard bow, and during this time, Haguro's action report states, Chōkai, under concentrated shell fire from enemy main strength, received hits on starboard side amidships. After receiving these hits, Chōkai signaled engines out of commission, and the ship began to slow down and fell out of formation. Now this is where the story gets slightly confusing and where the wreck comes into play. Within a 10-minute window during the shell fire, Chōkai suffered a secondary explosion that is believed to have damaged the engineering spaces. However, it's also possible that the engines were out of commission before this explosion occurred. It kind of depends on what you read as to how the explosion takes place and what its impact was. The general consensus was that 5-inch shells detonated the torpedoes on the afterdeck, and this caused the engineering spaces to become damaged. However, upon examining the wreck, all 4 torpedo launching stations were completely intact, along with the launchers themselves, and the torpedoes themselves were not present, so they were discharged before the battle started. So the question as to what this secondary explosion was has not yet been ascertained, but it was most definitely not torpedoes. Between 9:05 and 9:10, 5 dive bombers from the USS Kitkun Bay reported attacking a Mogami or Tone-class cruiser with their bombs, setting it ablaze, and watching it sink within 5 minutes. Now, while the 2 Mogami-class cruisers and 2 Tone-class cruisers that were present did not fall under this type of attack during this time, and none of the Japanese cruisers were reported as having been sunk at this time, it is possible that the target they actually struck was Chōkai. The reason being it's believed that this was indeed Chōkai is because at 9:18, Yamato received a message from Chōkai stating, "Direct bomb hit in forward machinery room, attempting to repair same." This is the only cruiser present that reported having been struck by bombs within the same time frame. However, Fowler's attack and Chōkai being bombed could be 2 separate events. The message sent at 9:18 would be Chōkai's final radio message. Yamato would no longer have contact with the cruiser. However, the Japanese have not quite lost the ship yet, as it would be sighted several times over the next hour. At 9:33, the IJN Yahagi spotted Chōkai 90 degrees to port. The IJN Tone's after-action report states 9:55, sight Chōkai bearing 70 degrees, starboard from the track chart, 7,000 meters, becoming unnavigable. At 9:57, Admiral Kirita orders IJN Fujinami to escort Chōkai, and at 10:04, the destroyer was permanently assigned to the cruiser. Unlike the Milwaukee with Chikuma, Kirita actually kept radio contact with Fujinami for one more message. At 4 a.m. on the 26th of October, Fujinami sent Yamato this message. By 21:40 the previous day, 25th of October, this vessel and Chōkai had reached approximate position 11-35 north, 126.5 east. However, at this time, Chōkai fully lost the ability to navigate, and the situation became hopeless. Therefore, Fujinami had transferred the crew and scuttled the cruiser with torpedoes, and is now proceeding toward Coron. This was the final message sent from the Fujinami, and it was the final message regarding Chōkai. There are a few interesting details from it. Firstly, it's clear that Chōkai had restored some engine power and was moving under its own propulsion machinery with assistance from Fujinami. At around 1240, the propulsion machinery gave out and Chōkai had to be abandoned. So this ultimately gives Chōkai an estimated sinking time of about 2200. Thanks to the wreck having been discovered, we can also add on to Chōkai scuttling as well, since during the battle it was never reported that the ship was struck by a torpedo fired from the United States. However, torpedo damage has been discovered on the starboard side of the forward magazines. As far as we know, the only torpedoes to have struck Chōkai were fired from Fujinami, so it is logical to assume this is scuttling damage. Going back to 1944, there is still one question to ask. What happened to the Fujinami? Now, if you look this up online, you will generally see that the ship was sunk on the 27th by air attack. However, this story actually hasn't been confirmed. The story goes that Fujinami received a radio message to assist the Hayashimo, which was another destroyer that had been disabled, and while doing so, it was attacked by U.S. aircraft, which resulted in it being sunk, with all hands lost, including Chōkai's survivors. Depending on which article you read, the USS Essex or USS Franklin have been given credit for sinking Fujinami. However, as far as Japanese sources go, Fujinami never had radio contact with Kurita again, and so the Japanese actually had no clue where the destroyer was. There is every chance it did not receive the radio message to assist Hayashimo. It is known that on the 24th of October, during the Battle of the Saboyan Sea, Fujinami was straddled by a bomb that exploded off its starboard bow in the vicinity of its gun turret. We also know that this bomb hit caused leaks under the waterline and resulted in the ship's speed being reduced. It has been suggested that this had worsened over time and could possibly be a factor in the ship's loss. Unfortunately, as it stands, without a wreck, it's impossible to tell what actually happened to Fujinami. What we do know for certain regarding the destroyer's loss is that it was the second time from this battle that a destroyer was sunk carrying the survivors from a heavy cruiser, and no one survived. With that having been said, there is nothing more to add on to this topic for today. So, if you have learned something new, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.